Story 1. For years ago, I trained a new worker who was honestly a nice guy at the time. Early 30s, seemingly healthy, very much into yoga, had a beautiful girlfriend. The works he seemed very balanced and healthy, and his name was Andrew. We had another long-time co-worker who was sort of Mr. Popular with managers, but honestly really annoying people could only take him in small doses. It was essentially the embodiment of a TikTok frat boy who would randomly dance on the job in freestyle. Extremely annoying. Anyway, his name was Brad. Now before I explain, I should include that this workplace sucks it barely. Holds a single star on Indeed. It's a large factory with no windows, toxic management, long hours. It was very hard on most people's mental health. So anyway, roughly a year into Andrew's stay, things started to change. He and I were mutually friendly to one another. We would have long civilized discussions about interesting things, but something was really out of place when he mentioned his new beliefs about the world being flat and a hologram moon theory. It was really unlike the old version of him who was really rational. I sort of shrugged it off and said it's probably a face or a strongly. Fast forward a few weeks, Andrew has seemingly took a lot of interest in coworker Brad and sort of developed some of his mannerisms, but in a more endearing way, kind of copying his silly dances and laughing, and it seemed harmless. But as months go past, he continued to dance more and more, to the point he had to be asked to stop by supervisors. He would even be moving around at the morning meetings using all the same mannerisms and phrases as Brad. But it's really started to creep out Brad to the point he switched shifts. We theorized maybe he was on drugs, but Andrew was very vocal against all substance use, including alcohol and weed and such. He was also a vegan. Where things changed for the worse is when Brad ends up getting with a new hire at work. She ends up becoming his girlfriend. They move in together and such. This is when Andrew shows up to work using Brad's name, even signing himself in on the logbook is him referring to himself as Brad or Morning. Then later that day, Andrew stands up on a work table screaming that he's in love with Brad's girlfriend, his arms spread out and across Jesus formation, face to the ceiling. The whole place was silent, and after he ended up standing in a corner with a broom sweeping nothing for the next several hours, he would not turn around from the corner, not even when tapped on the shoulder or called by name. The only time I saw him away from that corner was when it was time to go home. He was the last one out. Unfortunately, my job being QC, I'm always among the last ones out as well. Despite both of us being the last in the building, I did my best to act normal when passing him in the hallway. I glanced to them. He was looking directly at me, head tilted down, making a pseudo-snarling dog face, eyebrows in the V, tongue and teeth out. The next day, our boss decided Andrew needed to go to the hospital, so we actually made an appointment and got him in an Uber. He was put on leave for a week. The security guards who I was friends with told me Andrew kept showing up in the middle of the night trying to sign in for work at the card reader, sometimes at 2 to 3 in the morning. Anyway, surprisingly, a week later Andrew comes back and seems somewhat normal, almost like he has no recollection of anything he did. He even wrote an entire album on his phone in that time, which surprisingly was better than I thought it would be, but I noticed it was all love lyrics, sort of wacky country love songs, because things seemed to normalize with Andrew. He stated he really wanted to hang out with me, go for a hike, and throw axes at trees and stuff like that. I sort of didn't agree or disagree and told him I'd get back to him on that, as I was secretly a bit on edge. He asked me later in the day if I was still down, and I said unfortunately I had other obligations, and he said I guess I can't throw an axe at your face. That, and I laughed, not knowing how to react at all. I told the manager about that, and he kind of just scratched his head uncomfortably and shrunk his shoulders. Anyway, Andrew ends up finding Brad's address due to her work get-together where everyone was invited and someone leaked it to Andrew. They eventually find rocks and sticks and weird formations on their doorstep, like shrines, and we all collectively knew it was Andrew. Things got really weird when they actually found Andrew looking through their windows at night. He was also scratching the windows with his nails, calling out Brad's name repeatedly, whispering, "Brad, I need to tell you something." This is when our manager finally decided to take action and fight. 4 years later, Andrew still stalks Brad's now ex-girlfriend, who had to get a restraining order against him. He annually makes new Facebook accounts and adds all 200+ workers who used to work there. He uses a new name each time. With a different selfie, he sends a message to each one of us as well, saying, "Hey, it's Brad from work. So I guess my question is, what would this behavior be called, and how did such a normal, likable, level-headed person turn into this? Is there a term for this behavior? What would your diagnosis be? One of my friends had the balls to ask him in a reply if he recalls anything, which he doesn't seem to, but he sure remembers Brad's ex-girlfriend and says some extremely concerning things about how she's the one. I'm the bigger one, she's the smaller one, as a quote. He said that he was put on this earth to essentially save her. He also seemingly has no support at all from family or anything and is working a new job, living alone, unattended. I feel like this is sort of a risk. Anyway, I'm interested in some of your feedback in what he might be dealing with. Story 2. This took place around 15 years ago. I would have been about 13 years old. My dad has always taken an annual fishing trip with a friends that would put him out of state for about a week. I have numerous stories about weird things happening while he was gone on set fishing trips, from paranormal events to someone attempting to break into our house, but this one is the most unnerving to people when I tell it. When my dad would go on these trips, I would usually sleep in my parents' bed. My mom and I treated it like a little sleepover and would watch movies, stay up late, and gossip. Even on school nights, I remember falling asleep after a late night movie and being roused from sleep what felt like just minutes later. My mom is a light sleeper, while on the other hand, it takes a catastrophic level event to wake me up from a dead sleep. I remember waking up feeling as if something was wrong. The room was illuminated oddly, and there was a distant rhythm I was only partially aware of. I'm half asleep, and as I open my eyes, I can see my mom on top of the bed, on her knees, peering out of the window above her bed. I started to ask what's going on when she turned to me quickly and shushed me. I quietly joined her, looking out of the small box window, and was slightly cracked open, and the distant rhythmic chanting became more and more clear. Our house sat in front of a strip of warts. The trees aren't too thick and you can't see through most of the wooded area. The chanting was getting louder by the second, and the odd illuminations finally made sense. You could see a line of hooded figures and dark clothes holding torches, marching east, chanting what sounded like demonic dark things. It felt so real and scary as we held our breath, waiting to see what they would do. Or they headed towards the houses to burn them down. Were they going to attempt to break in and sacrifice us? It felt like ages that we sat there watching this line of people walk through the woods, their torches raised high and their chanting continuing through the night. That was it, and he just walked away. After what was probably more like 2 minutes, my mom and I laid back down and discussed what we saw. Trying to get back to sleep, we told my dad first thing in the morning when he called to check in, but I remember him not believing us. He thought it had to be a dream or something. That kind of thing didn't happen in our small town in Ohio. But the next day there was an article in the local newspaper about a lamb being slain on a makeshift altar on the east side of my town. My dad stopped doubting us, and my mom and I got even more freaked out. My parents still live in that house, and we've never seen any other cult-like behavior in the area. But that one evening freaked us out enough that I decided to permanently camp out in my parents' bedroom every time my dad left town until my late high school years. Maybe you stuck around. I appreciate it. Thanks for listening and allowing me to get my story out there. My friends and I were reminiscing about creepy stories this weekend. This one came up, and I haven't stopped thinking about it since, so I wanted to write it down and share. Story 3. I'm a security guard for an alarm response company. We answer alarms for businesses and private residences 99 of the time. It's a motion detector set off by a cat, or a restaurant forgot to disarm their staff before the stock truck arrived to unload. In this case, I was called out to a house where the back door alarm was set off. Well, I thought someone opened it. The owner was out of town, but she was alerted by her app and had her mother meet me there. We checked the door. It's locked. We figure maybe someone tried the door, but it didn't budge, setting off the alarm. But there's a light on inside. The mother mentions this to the daughter. On the phone, the daughter says she isn't sure if she left the light on or not. It's a good idea to make people think someone's home, but she just isn't sure. That gave me a bad tingle. The mother wanted to go inside to check, however, she didn't have a spare key. The neighbor did, but they were asleep, and the mother didn't want to wake them. So I fill out my papers and go back to my normal patrol routes. An hour later, the same house sends an alert out. I'm the only one in my city zone, so I answer it again. When I pull up, police and CSI are there talking to the mother and the now awake neighbor. They are reviewing the video footage sent to them by the daughter. I look at the footage. 4 armed men wearing masks and hoodies came out of the bathroom a minute after the mother and I left. They proceeded to rob the place they'd broken in and locked the door behind them. For appearances, they're the ones who turned on the light. The mother told me 3 guys who robbed her daughter's home a month before. Somehow they knew when this girl would be out of town. They appeared smart, desiring a quiet robbery without conflict, but they brought guns, so they were prepared to shoot their way out of trouble if need be. The mother had wanted to go in if she'd had a key or woken the neighbor for a kitty. We would likely have been shot dead by these guys when we went inside. Work doesn't give me Kevlar vests or anything if I ever get another house call and someone is there. I'm not going inside no matter what is asked of me. I count myself fortunate the way was blocked this time because I was prepared to foolishly go in and check if I could. The 1% of calls or something is actually off. It has never been as bad as this one. Story 4. About 5 years ago, I worked for a high-end kitchenware company as a floor salesperson. At the time I was about 20 years old. I'm a female and I'm a larger woman and I'm 5'9". I'm also mixed indigenous, so picture thick hair, dark features, white build. That kind of thing. This is important for later. I'd been working at this job for a few months at this point. My boss, whose side note was a total creep, had really warmed up to me, and it promoted me to key holder. Within a few weeks of working, I'd become comfortable closing on my own. And working alone too. Often I'd be working either a full day shift, which is 9:30 am to 6:30 p.m. alone, or I'd work a crossover shift where I'd overlap with someone for about an hour, then I'd close the store alone. That shift was 4 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. One evening I came in, greeted my boss. He then decided to take a smoke break for about 25 minutes within his last hour of overlap. I didn't mind. As I mentioned, the guy was a total creep, but as he was leaving I noticed a kind of strangely behaving man pacing outside of our store. Our location was inside of a mall, so you'd see window shoppers all the time, but this guy was pacing with intention. He was wearing a large jacket, sunglasses, and a hat, so it was genuinely hard to see him, but he would occasionally lower his glasses to peer into the store. And I even called out to him from behind the desk at one point, saying something like, "I don't bite, come on in a friendly way." He shook his head and said, just looking and alone but clear-sounding voice. He backed away, leaving the storefront. I brushed it off as some random just being too nervous to come into our store. Whatever, it happens all the time. It was at this point my boss returned from his smoke break and began finishing up a couple of his end-of-day tasks. Before leaving I mentioned to him, and I accidentally scared off my nervous window shopper. We kind of laughed it off and disregarded it as nothing, but something felt weird. He was pacing for a solid 20 minutes just by the window staring in. Again, though it's retail, I chalked it up to weirdness. After a few minutes the phone rang and I picked up. On the other end was a guy with a low and clear voice, huffing, asking about getting a gift for his girlfriend. The conversation went like this: "Oh no worries, we have a couple of options for gifts. Is she looking for knives, dinnerware?" Yeah, I don't know how she liked knights. I guess okay, if you're not sure what she already has, you could get her a specialty knife." Good idea. Specialty knives. I know I should have hung up at this point, but I continued, "It's okay, yeah, so specialty knocks we have an assortment. Some are meant for meat and fish, others are for vegetables. Does she like to cook a lot?" He proceeded to say some very sexual and derogatory things. "Excuse me," I questioned him. He continued on with the extreme comments. At this point I promptly hung up the phone, shaking and nervously looking around. My boss knew something was up and asked me what was wrong. I told him what had just happened, and he expressed his apologies, but otherwise didn't seem concerned. It clicked in my head. Suddenly the guy window shopping earlier had the same voice as the guy on the call. I was petrified. I told my boss I was nearly certain it had been the guy. At that exact moment my boss got a call from his very young girlfriend, and he had only 15 minutes earlier than he had planned. So there I was alone in a store and stuck there for another 4.5 hours, and the stars were not aligning for me that evening. I ended up calling security and let them know I'd received a threatening call from a customer who I was fairly sure had been wandering them. They stationed an officer near the store for the remainder of the evening, but I still felt entirely on edge. Every call after that I let go through to voicemail. I was too scared to answer again. I was also working at another store in the mall at the time. I called my friend there to ask if after their closing shift if I could walk home with them, and he agreed. I quickly walked over to the other store with a security guard nearby and started to walk home with my friend from my other job. The whole time I was scanning my surroundings, getting glimpses of shadowy figures outside and making myself anxious. Eventually I got home, calmed myself down, and tried to get some rest. The next day I had a shift at my other job with the same friend who walked me home the previous night, and at one point in the afternoon I picked up a phone call, and it was the same guy. I much more quickly realized who it was and hung up a lot faster this time around, but he got as far as saying, "I like this uniform better, I can see more of those curves without." Then I hung up. I told my boss at the game store about what happened, and we made an official buddy system. After that, nobody leaves alone ever. Luckily, we always worked in pairs, but we didn't separate until we were either at the bus stop or at home. Nothing happened after that, thankfully. It was just awful having it happen back to back like that, and with no conclusion. The security guard stayed on alert for a while. I ended up speaking to other female workers in the mall, and as it turns out, there was a handful of plus-sized women getting harassing and violent phone calls for a little while. But they never caught the guy doing it. I still think about it years later. I wonder where he is and what he's doing. I never saw him again, I think, at least, and if I did I wouldn't know. Anyway, thanks for listening. It feels good finally getting that off of my chest. Story 5. I studied abroad in Costa Rica for about 3 months, and all the students in this program were living with host families nearby the university, as the country is considered far safer. For men, I would often walk my female classmates to their host homes after class got out. The university had several security guards patrol the neighborhood on motorcycles to make sure that we were all safe, so walking at night never felt dangerous. This particular night I was walking 2 girls home, and it was completely dark out when we were about 2 minutes away from the first girl's house. The car drove by with 2 younger local guys in it, with passenger hung his head out the window and shouted some sexual things at the girls. Unfortunately, that wasn't a unique experience for the girls due to the machismo culture, but it was a little surprising, as guys generally won't say anything to girls that are with other guys. We continued walking until we were about 1 block away from the first house when we saw the car stop in the road in front of us. Both the passenger and the driver got out of the car and started to walk toward us. I told the girls to start walking the opposite direction while I stood there trying to figure out what I was supposed to do. There were 2 of them and only one of me, and at least one of the guys was keeping his hands in his pockets, potentially hiding a knife or a gun. Luckily, when the guys were only about 15 feet in front of me, and I still hadn't figured out how one dad-bod having college kid was going to fight off 2 fit and potentially armed goons, a security motorcycle came around the corner and sped toward us. The guys ran to their car and drove off. The security guard followed us for the rest of our walk home, and he would follow us every time we walked home for the rest of the semester. Story 6. I'm a 17-year-old female working as a cashier at a popular thrift store. I've been there for approximately 8 months, and I love my job and my coworkers. The common thing I've noticed is that, unfortunately, any time a new younger female cashier starts working, she will be head-on by plenty of older guys, and I was no exception to that. I've never had to deal with creepy or weird customers until this job, and I worked in the food industry before, so maybe that's why we of course get a handful of regulars. And while I've had a few creepy older guys hit on me before, there's a regular that comes in all the time. I want to say he's in his late 40s, but while he's always nice, my manager pointed out his obsession with me. I was called in the office the other day so he could show me how he acts and such with surveillance cameras. Here's a list of what's been pointed out to me that I didn't really notice before. He comes in at roughly the same time I'm working every day, and apparently doesn't show up on my days off. I work closing most of the time, so he comes in around 6 p.m. When he comes in, he will immediately look at the register I almost always work at and will do a double take looking for me. He usually buys one either. Spending about 15 minutes in the store, usually my manager has pointed out that he needs to buy something, or else he knows it'll look weird every time. Without fail, he will go to my register, and even when I was on the floor during recovery, he'll ask me to check him out because I'm his favorite cashier. If there's a shorter line, it doesn't matter, you will stab my register. Waiting and watching me, he lingers around after buying something just to talk to me, showing me things on his phone, making sure there's no one else in line. My manager said he approaches me when I'm alone so he can talk to me without holding up a lie. He's commented on my hickeys that I failed to cover up before. On my neck, making weird remarks here and there. He says he usually checks because there's always about one or two. He said I would look good as a blonde, which isn't inherently weird but paired with everything else, I guess it is when I wasn't wearing any makeup. It would say something like, you seem out of sorts recently. I started wearing makeup again recently. And he's commented saying he likes that I'm back to my old self. I've noticed weird flirty remarks with them, but I always brush it off because customers are always kind of weird and I deal with that often anyway. He'll lean over the register counter to talk to me closer, just his body language in general. He does a double take when he leaves too, keeping his eyes on me. I think it's possible he knows what car I drive. He was at my work this morning, even though I always do closes. I've asked my boyfriend who works with me if it's true that he never shows up when I'm off. He said yes, it's true. I don't think he knows my schedule, but he might know my car and see it in the parking lot. He always parks out of the store outdoor camera view, so I still don't know what car he drives. The general manager was made aware by the manager, but the creep didn't interact with me much today because I was never alone at the register or on the floor. I was training a new cashier today. He was there a lot longer than usual, I'm assuming because he was waiting for a time when I was alone and there were no customers. I think he gave up when he realized I would be training for the majority of my shift and seeing how busy it was since I worked opening yesterday. He came in before my shift at work, probably assuming I would be opening again. I'm working closing tonight. Apparently he came in earlier and saw the new cashier, so we actually ended up asking one of them new cashier who quit, probably thinking I quit. It's only 4:33. It usually comes in around 6. If I'm closing, I'm just waiting to see if he shows up for the second time today. I doubt he will since he might think I don't work today. My manager and I are going to keep a log of what time he comes in and leaves. I'm gonna keep his phone number saved in my notes so I can look him up and hopefully find his name and other information. I will possibly keep my phone on the counter to voice record what he says. I wish I could record him in person, but it would be too obvious if I get shown more security footage. I will video that instead. Story 7. Last night my boyfriend and I got in bed, lights off, TV on, in bed, naked as usual. A couple of minutes go by, your bus talking, and our cat jumps on the nightstand and is staring outside. He does this all the time, so I assume it's a strike cat out there. He runs across the bed to my nightstand. So I peek outside. My cat's tail is all fluffy, so I think it's just the cat that he doesn't like. I look out the window and see a phone screen. I have no clue what was on it. I didn't think to actually look that hard. It was a red thing in the middle, but that's all I know. I look at my boyfriend, assuming I'm just seeing the reflection of his phone, when I see my boyfriend is not holding his phone. I backed myself into the corner of the wall so whatever's in the window can't see me, and I just repeatedly say there's someone outside until my boyfriend finally gets up. I grab a sweater and pants from the floor and we're just walking around the house as he calls 911. We come back to the room and the guy is still out there, but my cat will not let me get near the window without growling, so I don't get to see his face. The cops get there a few minutes later and search the block. They come from the front yard, in the backyard, climb some fences, and they don't find anyone. They just say they'll be on the lookout and to stay aware. Pretty much my boyfriend and I are both reasonably shaken up. I point out the cat was acting similarly last night. Not exactly, but she was fluffed up and on edge. He pointed out that with how often I sleep naked or close to it's possible the guy has done that multiple times to see. He also points out that with the lights on you could definitely see into the bedroom from that window, so he would have been able to see us having sex if he caught us on the right night. There's no proof he's been there more than once, and we're neighborhood. He was probably just some guy on drugs wandering around. He left the gate open, stood there, even though we clearly spotted him, and just didn't seem too smooth in his operation. I don't know, I just hope it was a one-time thing. I feel so helpless. I didn't go outside and do anything because I didn't know if he had a weapon, but I wish I could have. My boyfriend wants to buy a gun this weekend, and I hope that can at least give me some sense of security. Story 8. Hello, I'm Evie. I wanted to tell my story because it was absolutely terrifying. At the time it all started, the morning of February 14th, 2018. I was in middle school and the campus was buzzing with lies. Guys were running around with gifts for their girlfriends. Girlfriends gave gifts to their boyfriends, friends exchanged candies all. In all everything seemed normal. I wasn't popular per se, but I knew everyone and everyone knew me, but I prefer to hang around with a small group of close friends because being around too many people made me anxious. During lunch, I was hanging around my usual group of friends, which consisted of 2 girls, Alex and Mia, and 3 guys, Nico, Adrian, and Elijah. Valentine's Day of all days made me even more anxious because a lot of people would join our group because of my friend Adrian. He attracted a lot of girls, and my friend Mia was such a sweetheart and a